why should you watch the DC Animated Universe, which the complete collection of I hold rather difficultly in my hands. Why should you watch it? This is actually a video inspired by the fact that Kevin Conroy, the great Batman voice actor, died last week, and which made me a little sad. I mean, not personally broken up, but definitely artistically sad and grateful for the wonderful work he did. And really, I would think of him, or do think of him, as my Batman, my cinematic Batman, or whatever. Funnily, not for the same reason some people have, which is that they watched the cartoons in the early 90s. I did a little bit, I think, see some on TV at the time, not many. Not because of Arkham Asylum and those games, though I did play Arkham Asylum and enjoyed it. More because, well, I watched Justice League and a bit of Batman the Animated Series with my wife not long after we got married. And then more recently, in the last few years, we've watched through the whole DCAU pretty much, and we've both so thoroughly loved it, and we watch kind of parts of it with our kids as well, and they love it, and it's a shared thing. It's very important, and so in that sense, there's been a kind of such a heavy influence of Conroy on me in the last several years that he's overwhelmed other versions of Batman for me. My actual first Batman, cinematic Batman, was probably almost certainly Val Kilmer, because I had the tape of that. But yeah, this is the DC Animated Universe. It is a superhero shared universe, well, it's not a multiverse, but a cinematic universe, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, except it started in 1992, 16 years prior. The second, as far as I can see, the second oldest shared comic book style universe is actually the Viewersk universe, Kevin Smith's films, which are the shared universe element is, there's a strong sense of that being a comic book thing with him. But this is, I think, the best comic book cinematic universe, or whatever. Mostly it's television. I think it's both very good and very interesting at several levels. It's incredibly diverse. It could teach Marvel things to improve with, and certainly could teach DC stuff to improve on nowadays. So what I'm going to say is why I like it, and I'll try to keep that brief, and then I'll give an overview of what is in it, just in case you are interested in getting into it. Basically, it started with, so I will say this much, it started with Batman the Animated Series, which the initial 2 seasons ran from 92 to 95 or something. One was a very long series, or season, and there were 2 films associated with it. Mask of the Phantasm, maybe the best cinematic release of a Batman film ever, and Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, which ended up being delayed because this so renovated Mr. Freeze. They wanted him in the main films. That meant Arnie got a role as Mr. Freeze. That was so bad that they wanted to detoxify and waited. But they started this because they wanted to. They got the rights to with Fox, and they got guys from Tiny Toons to get involved. And they just made Batman stories, and mostly it was Batman stories. In a couple of characters from outside Batman, specifically Jonah Hex and Zatanna, appeared, but Batman was just this thing, this kind of series. It was a great series, very artistically bold and creative, and very serious for a kids show. So it had charcoal and chalk style painted backdrops, hand painted. It had hand-drawn title cards, which were very aesthetically pleasing. It had great voice talent, and with cast working in the same room together to record, not recording their parts separately. It had plots and stories that were very serious for a kids show without often being overly. So there are a couple which are definitely tougher for the younger end of your kind of kid audience. I'd see that with my kids who are younger. But there's this big range of stuff in there. And it became its own definitive and self-coherent depiction of Batman, with increasing over even within the first season, let alone by the time you get to the second season, continuity. Things developed. To some degree, relationships developed, stories developed. The opponents they were fighting changed in some ways. Then, and this is the important thing, what happened was that Fox had made enough episodes to syndicate, but still had to keep the rights up. They'd ensured they made enough episodes to syndicate, but they had to keep the rights up. What they failed to, and so simultaneously, as the rights were beginning to lapse, or just before the rights began to lapse, WB wanted a series, and they got the rights to Superman, and they got the guys who'd done Batman to come over, or most of them, not Eric Radomski, very important in Batman, but Paul Dini and Bruce Timm to come over to Superman. And they drew it with a new style, a cheaper, easier style that wasn't quite as labour intensive and therefore was cheaper, but was still, in fact, in many ways more distinctive. When you think of that Superman depiction, that is the new style, the low detail style, and very iconic, exceptionally iconic. They've all been influenced by the Fleischer cartoons of the 30s and 40s, which I have most of actually on a disc. They're really interesting, but they'd also been influenced. So they're influenced by Golden Age stuff, particularly with Superman. But Batman was influenced by those too, and Batman is influenced in writing by a broad array of stuff. There's some Silver Age influences in there. There's certainly some 80s stuff, and it was partly to follow on from Batman 1989 and Batman Returns that it was made, so it has those influences as well. It has the darker palette. In that sense, it's more of a 70s and 80s Batman. But yeah, they made Superman, and then the rights lapsed, and then suddenly WB were like, well, why don't we just buy those rights? We have Batman too. So they did buy Batman, and you get it's a 3-part episode in this, but you get the world's finest, the Batman Superman movie, the best Batman Justice League movie, if you want to put it that way, I think, yet made. So you have this thing where you've got these artistically bold, creative people. You've got this brilliant voice recording thing where the casting directors picking really good people, and then they're coming together, like Kevin Conroy or Michael Ansara as Mr. Freeze, Mark Hamill as the Joker. Massively good voice talent, and they're in the same room together, so bouncing off each other. It feels really organic and good. Is not afraid to tell new stories, and in Superman you begin to see these wider themes develop, particularly around Superman and Darkseid. I'll come back to that. And this sets the scene for all these other series as you go through. Batman Beyond, set in the future. Static Shock and Zeta, the two kids shows. They both have really good things going on, including Project Zeta. Then you have Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And you've got a bunch of films associated with each, including, for some people, what is the best Batman film, Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, which is definitely not a kid-friendly movie. But you have all of these, and you realise that the plots are continuing and threads are being picked up from, in some cases, over a decade beforehand. Most obviously, you have stuff at the end of JLU, the last of these series. There have been 2 films made, or at least canonised officially, in recent times that Bruce Timm was doing for DC anyway, and he said they are part of it. But we'll get to that. We'll get to the main end, 2006, and you're picking up on threads both. Well, in 2005, you're picking up on some threads that have been there from 1992 and from Batman Beyond in the late 90s and early noughties at the end of season 2 of JLU. And then in season 3 of JLU, you're picking up on stuff that's been important for nearly 10 years with Superman and stuff around Superman. And so you've got these long-running threads that are never kind of pushed in terms of like, here's the films that build up the Avengers, though some of the same trick is there. You do the establishing stuff and then you make the big thing. Justice League is itself a proof of that, because really it's based around the fact that Batman and Superman are both culturally recognisable and they've got all this stuff behind them already. But it builds up to that, and you're getting these things paid off years afterwards, but in a way that never feels either too late or, generally speaking, lazy or ineffective, but is just artistically really integrated and interesting, all with this brilliant art style, all with the amazing music by Shirley Walker and Lita Ritmanis and Michael McCuston, with the amazing voice talent and all the rest. And you get plots done in this, the Project Cadmus arc in season 2 of JLU, or the Darkseid stuff running through Superman and Beyond, or the general arc of Bruce Wayne, who is the central character of really the whole of it, with Clark Kent, Superman the second. But you get this kind of arc of, if you particularly go for Mask of the Phantasm, which is a somewhat flashback, fairly early on though, in the 93 or so, saying how he became Batman, all the way forward to the chronological end of events, and you see the journey of this man who is willing to sacrifice himself to save people, but is a broken person, broken by his experiences, and you see the journey of that many of these main characters through this long arc, both in our chronology and their chronology, And the fact there's such a variety of shows. Superman is this kind of upbeat and pretty show, bright. They went for this ocean liner deco style, whereas Batman, much more gothic deco, is brooding, dark, sad, often tragic. And Justice League is super heroic. Batman Beyond is very different again, with this kind of this futuristic both appearance and feel, and the idea of what is a different Batman. Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond is a very different Batman to Bruce Wayne, and so you're also re-envisioning characters in that classic comic book way. So that's why I'd recommend it. I think it's, in a general sense, I think it's well worth watching for those reasons. But maybe some more can come out. I'll spend a little bit now just going through the series, and just saying what there is and what kind of watch order you could go for and what's good about each, I guess. First, Batman the Animated Series. This is the current Blu-ray UK edition. This includes the first two original series. It includes the third season, The New Batman Adventures, which was made by WB after the rights lapse, and so it's made in the Superman style. And then it also has two films, Mask of the Phantasm, Batman and Mr. Freeze. There are two other Batman films. There's Batman Mystery of the Batwoman, which was early noughties, and Batman and Harley Quinn, which was 2017, I think. Someone can correct me if they know. But which was much later, but was a Bruce Timm film, or was it written by him possibly? Teleplay, yeah, co-written by Bruce Timm and story by Bruce Timm, and yeah, it's in the same animation style, and it's kind of officially Timm, who is sort of the biggest single voice in the DCAU, says no, I would see this as part of it. So that's the Batman chronology in the main timeline, back from 92 to 2000 and something, and Batman mostly is characterized by there's mystery, there's action, there's tragedy, and tragedy being constitutive. The idea of, oh no, he's lost his parents, he goes back to Crime Alley regularly. There are multiple episodes on anniversaries each year. He is a loner, but who somehow accidentally ends up with this family around him. Both Alfred, his adoptive dad, but also Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, Barbara Gordon, and friends elsewhere, Commissioner Gordon particularly. And so you get this, classic Batman and archetypal Batman, which balances both some of the Silver Agey humour and attributes to the Silver Age. There was an episode called The Grey Ghost, which stars Adam West as a washed-up TV actor who played a superhero called the Grey Ghost in the 60s, who Bruce had loved. A very, very good episode. And Beware the Grey Ghost, I think it's called. Someone can correct me again. But yes, so you have this tribute and this acceptance of what we might think of as a campier era, but without it being camp at all. It doesn't actually play that game, generally speaking, but it kind of just says we embrace the idea that there might be humour here. But then it goes more into a 70s and 80s style. Not Frank Miller so much. There's one episode in New Batman Adventures which does do active tributes to both those eras, the Silver Age and Frank Miller. But the 70s and 80s is much more characterised, actually, if anything, that not visually but stylistically, by Killing Joke, by Arkham Asylum, and somewhat by The Dark Knight Returns specifically, but in the sense, not so much the visual style or the big aesthetics, but the idea that Batman is this dark knight. That's all the way through the 70s, especially in the 80s. And Batman the Animated Series does that. It balances those two influences, so there's quite a lot of joy and fun in it, but it is brooding and dark as well. And it covers basically every major Batman villain well, and it renovated many. Particularly Mr. Freeze is the most famous example. Clayface as well. It canonised the version of Clayface that really most of us think of, probably. It has legendarily iconic representations of particularly the Joker, most obviously, but a very good takeovers from Batman Returns of Catwoman and Penguin. It has a very, very good Two-Face and Two-Face arc, including episodes with just Harvey Dent as Harvey Dent, which are great. And poignant. It's effective that it does all these things, and it gives this summed up Batman, albeit over 109 episodes and for films, so it's not that summed up. But there we are. That's Batman. Second in, and that's probably where you start watch order wise. And I'd recommend generally a internal chronology, not an external chronology for watch order. It does mean you end up with a series that was in the middle, like Batman Beyond. But generally speaking, I think that's the right approach. And you can do it the other way. You could go in strict publishing order as well. The next to be published and the next chronologically is Superman, which does end up running alongside New Batman Adventures. Superman is much brighter, bubblier, happier. He's all-star Superman. He's the great Grant Morrison graphic novel or series, which was meant to sum up Superman, and which was a rebellion, which came after this, a rebellion against two-saw-haired, punchy Superman, tragic Superman. Superman, instead of being summed up in All-Star Superman and here, as a paragon of virtue, as a genuine good guy. And you might think that's boring, but I think that's an absurd view to literally be like, oh, good guys are boring. But specifically the reason it's not boring is because you have someone actually attempting to conquer themselves, govern themselves, and defeat enemies to protect people. It's a simple story that works. And there's a lot of effort that goes into creating a world around him that is the offset, is the counterpoint. You've got sarcastic Lois, who's great. You've got Lex Luthor, famously voiced by Clancy Brown, and a famous and wonderful performance of Lex, as iconic in many ways as Mark Hamill as the Joker. I should say actually Batman, you get Harley Quinn invented in Batman. That's pretty relevant. She's invented Batman the Animated Series and has never been bettered in any media since. So yeah, you get this heroic, kind, fun, pleasant Superman, a guy you actually like. You get a great supporting cast. You get villains. Superman has a weaker rogues gallery, basically, than Superman. We get Lex, we get Brainiac, we get effectively Zod. Is his name Jaxa, Marlon Jaxa, voiced by Ron Perlman, actually, who voices many characters in the DCAU. You get these Kryptonian criminals who had staged a coup. You get them who are representing the Zod factor. You get some new villains. You get Parasite is a more traditional villain. You get some new villains, particularly Livewire, the most famous one, who's in several episodes over the course of the series and then in the comics as well. And you also get Darkseid. And a big thing going on is that you get the Jack Kirby New Gods stuff, which not uniquely or for the first time. You basically get that integrated into Supergirl as a very major theme. Oh, you get Lobo. Lobo is great here and in Justice League. Mr. Mxyzptlk, who is also great. You get Bizarro. So you get the whole rogues gallery, but obviously some of those like Mxyzptlk or Bizarro have to work differently. They are not straight villains like Lex usually is, like Metallo, who is in it, or like Parasite. You get some straight fun episodes, like Monkey Fun. It's just about Lois's pet monkey coming back from space. Take that as you will. Lobo, the main man, the two-parter, is basically a comedy episode. But yes, Speed Demons, this is a relevant thing, we'll get there. But yeah, you get these episodes with all these villains being drawn in, new ones being created. But the biggest of all is Darkseid. More than Lex in some senses. Lex is Superman's villain, but Darkseid is everyone's villain. He's the world's villain, and his story continues through multiple series. And in here, it starts with... what episode is it? Is it A Little Piece of Home? No, it's not that one. It starts very early. Tools of the Trade, Disc 2 on this Blu-ray. Tools of the Trade, episode 12, where some mobsters are being supplied, it turns out, by a guy who can use boom tubes and comes from Darkseid. Then you get a bit later, Father's Day, a guy turns up from this place to try to take out Superman. Then you get the actual invasion, Apocalypse Now. The sequel, you get more stuff happening in Little Girl Lost, where Supergirl comes in and has to deal with Granny Goodness. And then you get Legacy, the finale to the whole series, and a pickup of what's happened. And that story runs through. Darkseid is definitional for the DCAU in that sense. And is it Michael Ironside or something like that who does the voice? again, iconic performance, definitional performance, and so much better than either the more recent cinematic or relatively recent, say a decade ago, comic appearances of Darkseid, which were quite hyped at the time, or at least of Apocalypse, if not Darkseid himself, just where often they look bad or boring or confusing. Darkseid here is so menacing, is an incredible villain. But it's also relevant to say that this, Superman, and to a degree New Batman Adventures, is where the DCAU as a crossover thing starts. Speed Demons has the Flash turn up. World's Finest, which is a 3-part, the Batman Superman film, has Bruce come to Metropolis. Technically, which one is it? Yeah, New Kids in Town has the Legion of Superheroes. In Brightest Day has Green Lantern. Carl Rayner, Green Lantern. A Fish Story has Aquaman. There's an episode called Nighttime as well, where Superman goes to Gotham because Batman's gone missing. You do have then the bizarre, wonderful experience of Kevin Conroy voicing George Newbern, pretending to be Kevin Conroy. Basically, so he does Superman. He is Superman, so the voice pretending to be Batman, so the voice is right. Very good. Superman might be my favourite series of the lot. Not everyone would go that way at all. Most people would not. But there's something so colourful and bright and creative and innovative about it. I can't help but like it. Chronologically, you next come in terms of the main timeline to Static Shock, which is a Milestone Media product bought out by DC, created Dwayne McDuffie, comes in, helps create a show of it, and eventually goes into Justice League 2. Static's an odd one. It was a kids show, and it sometimes shows those roots more than other times, but where these teenagers end up getting, loads of teenagers end up getting superhero powers, basically. Is the summary. The first 2 seasons, there are things like when he and Shaquille O'Neal team up to beat people. I quite like that episode. There's some oddities, but from the start of season 2, you get the introduction with the big leagues of Batman comes in. So, and then by season 3, there's also more of a visual style change to match it more closely with the rest of the DCAU. You actually get some interesting stuff. I'm thinking there's a 2-parter, Static in Africa, and there's a sequel which begin to create and bring in other superheroes, not from the Big Bang event where these teenagers get powers in this city, but from Africa. A League of Their Own is, and Hard as Nails is another Batman episode. League of Their Own is a Justice League crossover, and then Fallen Hero is a Green Lantern episode. So you have a lot of crossovers in there with the official voice actors. But the big thing with Static Shock is it's good natured. It's quite easy. It's certainly appropriate for kids, I would say. It's bright. It's creative. It's not always blow away, but there are some really quite interesting and powerful episodes, much more powerful than you might expect. And as a way of adding in, it also trails the alas never realised on screen Teen Titans, which the cartoon ended up being not a DCAU cartoon. Bruce Timm was vaguely involved but tried to keep himself out. Glenn Murakami did the stuff he wanted to. Fair enough. I think we missed out, but there's Static and Gear would have been, or particularly Static, would have been Titans in such a universe, along with at least Tim Drake Robin and Beast Boy, I think, would be the other 2 that were confirmed. We then get, chronologically, Justice League Unlimited, and the film, which is more or less the last thing we haven't watched, like a last bottle of a great old vintage, a Kevin Conroy vintage we haven't watched. We've been keeping it for a special occasion. Justice League and the Fatal Five versus the Fatal Five, which is the big 3 plus Astro, Starboy, and Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern. But Justice League is 2 seasons initially of 26 episodes each, so 52, and then 39 episodes over 3 shorter seasons in Justice League Unlimited, which is initially, season 1 of Justice League is at points a bit stodgy actually, but there are some great episodes in it too. But this realisation of the team show where you get stories on everyone and you're trying to draw in all these other characters, John Stewart, Green Lantern, particularly obviously Flash, Wally West Flash, and drawing in this character, that character, doing this and that, and giving some episodes to Superman and Batman, but they've had a lot of time, so they need less. Superman tends to get a bit more time over the Justice League seasons than Batman does. Batman has had so much. Though Batman still gets some stuff, and he gets, particularly in JLU, some very important stuff. But yeah, you introduce these other characters. You again create definitional versions of them. Cheeky Wally West, serious Jon Stewart, Shia Hole, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman isn't always as well served. Not that she doesn't get episodes, she does, but some of her episodes are weaker than some of the equivalent episodes for other characters. She has a couple of very good episodes, Maid of Honor in season 2, and she has some good JLU appearances too, but she is perhaps a bit less fully successful than some of the others are, than Hawkgirl or Green Lantern or Flash or Martian Manhunter, i.e. the other 4 new major Justice League characters. You do get, you then basically get the fact that they have proved themselves so much they're kind of allowed to do whatever they want, and for 39 episodes in Justice League Unlimited, just everything's mental. They're bringing in random characters you've never heard of, characters from all over the place, having missions with Mr. Terrific and Vigilante and Steel, for all the way back from voiced by Michael Dorn in Superman, not voiced by Michael Dorn here, I think. But he's officially Calabac only from later seasons. But all these characters going off on missions together, led by someone else. You get a bunch of new, fairly important characters: The Question, Green Arrow, Huntress, Black Canary, Stargirl, Stripe. Those are maybe the 6 biggest obvious new ones, and Hawkman as well. There's a love triangle there to deal with. Vixen as well, another love triangle. It's kind of a love quadrangle, a bit confusing. You get a lot of serious themes about romance, makes it a bit less appropriate for some kids maybe. You get episodes covering more or less, basically you get episodes covering most of the things you've ever wanted to get out of a Justice League TV series, and you get some of the most amazingly executed arcs, more or less in any comic media, if you want to count it like that. Most famously, the Cadmus arc of season 2. To a lesser degree, there is a solid finale arc as well, which maybe could have done with an extra episode, but is very good. That's one thing, it's always a 25-minute episode, basically, so there are restrictions. JLU, I think, for many fans of the DCAU, is their favourite season, or show. I mean, it's 3 seasons. Finally, internal chronology, but not in publication, you get to, well, Batman Beyond and Zeta, its spin-off. Batman Beyond is got a good Blu-ray. The kids shows, inverted commas, aren't on Blu-ray. Everything else is. There may well be reissues of Justice League. I wouldn't be surprised if you get a box set reissue of that soon, because the actual Justice League ones are quite old. But Terry McGinnis he's motivated by the murder of his father to punish crime. Pretty classic Batman. But he has a winged suit with jet boots and loads of new weapons, and he can go invisible. He's in the future. And Terry is a different person to Bruce. Thing for discussion maybe in the comments with for those with more knowledge of the show, but he's different to Bruce. He's a different kind of guy. And he is a balance to this embittered, lonely old Bruce, accompanied only by Ace the Bat Hound, alienated, it seems, from people who do love him, in fact. But yeah, it's I think Batman Beyond is at points one of the best DCAU shows. Parts of season 1, episodes within the long season 2, and the end run on season 3 are about as good as anything gets in the DCAU. I think it suffers from an attempted shift to being slightly broader audienced in season 2, though I mean Terry's Friend Dates a Robot or The Egg Baby are pretty good. The season 2, otherwise there are some bits they like about. Relevantly, there's an episode called Zeta about essentially shape-shifting holograph using rather robots, killer robots, one of which goes rogue, called Zeta. Season 3, from the middle onwards, more or less, all of it has good stuff. There are some very good new villains. Ink and Spellbinder, and you get here the pack of cards. What are they called? The Royal Flush Gang, introduced, who then get retrofitted into very effectively into JLU, but you have 10 from there, particularly as a Catwoman-y figure. Curare, another well-liked character. You get some interesting stuff. You get a few interesting appearances of classics. You get Mr. Freeze, you get Bane, you get most importantly, you get Return of the Joker in the film Return of the Joker, and you find out the canonical ending to the Joker's story. You do get in the call. You do get an older Superman with the future Justice League and Terry taking part in the Justice League. There is one other place which I'll touch on it just in a second, but where you get a future Justice League as well. That's fun. The future Justice League is one of my favourite things. Zeta, we're most of the way through season 1. We haven't watched season 2. We only watch it with our kids because my wife and I haven't watched it, but we've watched enough. We watched a few episodes, thought this is fine, we'll cope with this. But here, Zeta is in 2 Batman Beyond episodes. This is the standalone by some good alumni, actually. Bob Goodman and Hilary Bader, particularly. It doesn't get enormous amounts of love. And in that sense, if you set yourself up by thinking, oh, people don't like this, you'll watch it and think, oh, wait, this is actually genuinely okay. There are some good episodes, there are some boring episodes. It, so far, has not hit the heights of Static, which would be the comparison. There are massive issues, probably, and it's probably to do with budget and team, but to do with reliably making it look like the future and not like the present, but with some high-tech internet cafes and robots, which it sometimes does. It doesn't completely, at the point we're in season 1, have a visual feel that works, but it's less bad than you'll sometimes read on people saying you don't need to watch it. There is one final set of future stuff, which is stuff that happens in Justice League Unlimited, basically. Technically also in, I feel like in one Static episode as well. Am I right in thinking that? You get a couple of future, yeah, I'm pretty certain. You get a couple of future Static-y moments and future Terry few other Terry moments you see elsewhere outside of Batman Beyond in Static and JLU. You also get some stuff in the past. Similarly, you get a sequel to the Jonah Hex episode from Batman, the animated series, in Justice League Unlimited with a time travel episode. The second part of that time travel two-parter is in the future. You get an episode called Epilogue, which deals with a bunch of future events in the DCAU. And yeah, there's a Static episode, I think, where there is a Superman crossover actually into Static too. But yeah, so you get all these things. It's a really exhaustive presentation. There are corners of the best of DC which aren't explored. I mean, there are plenty of corners in general, but corners of the best of DC that aren't explored. You get a bunch of you get a lot of Wonder Woman episodes. I don't think she's neglected, but there is definitely scope for a stronger presentation. And with more use of more of her villains. Amazon. There's one episode with an Amazon villain, but there's some other stuff around Amazon rivalries and the source material that could have been used. Cheetah is really only there as a Injustice gang character. The other one you could see, I mean, Bruce Timm went on to make the unconnected Hal Jordan Green Lantern series. Hal Jordan is an alternate Green Lantern in this, so alternate timeline guy. He did make a Green Lantern series, and it's a good series, but there's no DCAU series. There's just the couple of things that involve Kyle Rayner, and then the main Jon Stewart episodes. Particularly, there's maybe 3 cosmic episodes or something. There's not many, and so you get that Green Lantern cosmic stuff neglected comparatively because there's so many other things to do. You could do more there. You could also have more Flash. There are 2 very important Flash episodes. One, the excellent Comfort and Joy. One of the main threads there, it's one of multiple stories, but one of the main threads is Flash and Ultra Humanite trying to fulfill some kids' Christmas wishes. That's very good. And then there is a thing where Flash's statue is being revealed at the Flash Museum in Central City. And you've never seen any of this stuff, but you go there. I guess you get Weather Wizard actually in Superman. You get one of his villains then. You get Grodd in Justice League as a general villain. You get this kind of a couple episodes where he's sort of the main character, but they're not necessarily Flash episodes. and then you get these other things. And this final one is Flash and Substance JLU episode, where the Trickster, voiced by Mark Hamill, who voiced him in the 91 TV series as well of The Flash, and later played the Trickster in the Arrowverse Flash. Trickster, Captain Cold, and is it Weather Wizard again in that or something? Basically, like a Mirror Master want to take him out. They're like, we have to take out the Flash because he's got a museum now, and there's all this backstory that's hinted at that you're like, that's fun, I don't need to know it all. This is actually in its own way a wonderful tribute, but there's some scope there. There's a few characters where you could just push a bit further. There's also a couple of episodes, Niche and JLU, which I'm like, I wish I'd had more of that because I want to know more. But generally it's exhaustive. Generally it's physically beautiful. It's generally vocally beautiful. It accomplishes these great plot arcs from both within a series, but also from 92 to 2006, and indeed to 2017 and 2019. I suppose now it seems less likely than ever that there'll be any more DCAU shows. Batman is the most saleable property. Kevin Conroy was the most saleable voice. But perhaps, just perhaps, someone can get Bruce Timm to make a DCAU Flash film with Michael Rosenbaum, or a Jon Stewart with, is it Kevin Michael Richardson does Jon Stewart? Someone remind me. But something like that, or Carl Rayner indeed. Just something that fits back in and is just a different angle, a different place. It's unlikely, but we can dream because it's such a wonderful accomplishment. Tell me your thoughts on the DCAU if you've watched it. Tell me your favourite cinematic universes, and thank you for abiding with this diversion from your usual programming. Till next time.